This is the city the world thinks it knows. Rio de Janeiro is the capital of beauty, samba, and the promise of an eternal summer. Millions of tourists come every year in search of the heat, the landscapes, and the easy smiles. A metropolis built between the sea and the mountains, an unmatched scenario, a postcard that transcends borders. But behind the Copacabana skyline and the grand hotels, the reality of this city is divided. Hidden in the terrain, another landscape emerges with different rules, where beauty gives way to the law of the strongest. And there, in that other landscape, the war never ends. In over 1,000 favelas in Rio de Janeiro, the state lost control decades ago. The law that rules isn't the constitution, but the force of the factions. The problem is no longer singular. It is a constant dispute for territory with internal conflicts and wars between rival gangs. The price of this dispute is paid by those who did not choose to fight. Daily life is defined by the constant fear of gunfights that can start at any second, without time, without warning. According to recent data, more than a third of the city's territory lives under the dominion of criminals or militias. It is not just criminality, it is a parallel power, a local dictatorship. Barricades block not only police access to the communities, but also residents and emergency services like firefighters and ambulances. There are highly trained troops for different levels of threats, but BOPE is the extreme response, prepared for the maximum degree of complexity, acting with the certainty that, above them, there is no one else to call. In this scenario of maximum complexity, where there is no higher authority to appeal to, and the enemy is armed with military-grade rifles, the only option left to the state is to trigger its force of last resort, the Special Police Operations Battalion. To face an undeclared war, the state needed to forge a weapon that did not exist. BOPE was not born ready. It was molded by the failure of conventional public security. Veterans described the beginning brutally. Conventional police were not made for war. The Hill demanded soldiers, but the state only sent guards. This created a culture of excellence through pain. It is not just a police force, it is a filter. Out of every 100 men who try to enter, the majority quits. The goal is not just to create soldiers, but to create operators who function where the common law fails. For the resident of the favela, the arrival of the black armored truck has a double meaning: the fear of imminent confrontation and the certainty that the talking is over. The worldwide fame of BOPE was not born from movies or marketing. The black uniform and war tactics raise a question for those watching from the outside. After all, why is BOPE recognized globally? The answer lies not only in the quality of the troops, but in the brutality of the scenario they face.
Me ajuda, mãozão. Calma. Calma. Tira, calma. Segura um pouquinho. Zona! Vai aqui, Zona! Vai olha aqui, porra!
October 2025. Intelligence data confirmed what the streets already felt. Organized crime is not retreating, it is evolving. The Red Comandos has expanded its dominion over the population. These aren't just gangs dealing drugs on corners, they are territorial armies controlling the lives of more than 4 million people in the metropolitan area. And where drug trafficking doesn't rule, the vacuum is filled by the militia, paramilitary groups formed by agents of the state itself, a mafia that doesn't sell drugs but sells the right to exist, charging fees on everything, from cooking gas to the safety of those who live there. What we see in the headlines as gang war is in practice a dispute for sovereignty. Home invasions, hostages, enforced curfews, the pure third command consolidates itself as a third force, and the city's borders are drawn with rifles, not with pens. This pressure cooker exploded in the mega operation of 2025. The result, 121 dead. For the international press and critics watching from afar, the numbers sounded like a massacre. The debate on police violence took over the newspapers and the courts. But those living on the front lines have a different view. While the wealthy districts screamed against the police, the Favelas sighed in relief. Polls revealed the unthinkable to outsiders. 87% of residents in the affected areas supported the action. This is not a defense of violence. It is a cry for help from those living under a criminal dictatorship. For those who wake up and sleep under the aim of illegal rifles, the arrival of the elite troop is not seen as an invasion, but as the only force capable of facing monsters that the common law can no longer reach. The world recognizes BOPE because in Rio de Janeiro, the alternative to the police is not peace, it is total submission. Rio de Janeiro between the late 60s and the early 90s was a powder keg. While organized crime gained body in the communities, structuring itself into factions and acquiring heavier weaponry, the military police faced a dilemma. Their standard forces lacked the preparation or the tactical reserve necessary to respond to the escalation of violence and the new security crises. The inability of the police force for the new scenario of urban warfare was sadly confirmed by an emblematic fact. The idea of creating BOPE emerged after the tragic outcome of a hostage situation in 1974 at the Evaristo de Moraes Penal Institute, known as Galpão da Quinta. On that occasion, the prison director, Major Darcy Bittencourt, who was held hostage by criminals attempting to escape, was killed, along with some prisoners, after the intervention of the police force. That disaster exposed the brutal lack of specialized training. The chaotic management of that crisis was witnessed by the then APA Captain Paulo Cesar de Amendola. Motivated by the urgency and the tactical failure that cost lives, Amendola proposed to the general commander the creation of a group of police officers specifically trained to act in actions of extreme risk. Thus, the idea born from the trauma of 1974 became a reality. January 19, 1978, the NUCO-E Special Operations Company nucleus was created. Initially installed at the training center in Sulakap, the new COE was formed by volunteers endowed with proven moral integrity, and some already possessed specialization in armed forces courses. BOPE was finally on its way. With the visual identity and philosophy ready and the battalion finally consolidated, BOPE earned its home in December 2000. The choice was not random. By installing itself at the top of Tavares Bastos, a community with a history of not being dominated by crime, BOPE not only gained a barracks but a strategic fortress in the heart of the city, positioning itself for the next great mission: pacification. The Special Operations course is designed not to teach but to eliminate. The statistics are brutal. The historical completion rate is below 20%. From a full class of 50 volunteers, there have been cases where only 4 made it to the end. The rest, they fall by the wayside. In 39 years, by 2017, BOPE had formed only 404 skulls, caveras, in its entire history. This gives an incredibly low average of about 10 operators per year. The tradition of the Cemetery of Quitters in the Special Operations course is one of the most symbolic and psychological rituals of the training. It is a designated spot within the training area where the helmets and the identification numbers of the students who ask to leave or are dismissed are deposited. This rigidity transformed a tactical unit into a pop phenomenon. Cinema immortalized the black uniform. BOPE stopped being just police to become a brand known anywhere on the planet. Global projection came in 2007 with the release of Elite Squad, Face, Tropa de Elite, which took the black uniform and the BOPE skull beyond Brazil, reaching the world. The film transformed a special operations troop into a global symbol of urban warfare, extreme discipline, and a moral code that admits no concessions. Every BOPE operator was once a street cop. No one enters the unit directly, does not teach the basics. It tests the limits of men and eliminates those who cannot sustain extreme pressure. This experience has made BOPE a world reference in dense urban warfare. Operating where civilians and conflict mix all the time, the troop is cited as superior even to units like SWAT and Yamam. The COSPAS is the selective and formative process of BOPE, created not to teach fundamentals but to filter those who are already police officers and test who can truly operate at the limit. From the first day, the student is subjected to sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, constant psychological pressure, and decision-making under real stress. The goal is not athletic performance, but emotional control, conscious obedience, and resistance to pain, fear, and chaos. Throughout the course, the candidate learns patrol techniques in armed confrontation areas, shooting in urban environments, close quarters combat, and absolute teamwork. Any character flaw, psychological break, or inability to act under pressure results in immediate dismissal. Therefore, finishing the COESP does not just mean graduating, it means proving that you are capable of operating where the state fails, with no margin for error and no room for vanity. BOPE's headquarters, high up in Tavares Bastos, was not chosen by chance. It symbolized an idea that the state believed was possible to retake territory and stay In the late 2000s, this idea gained a name and a strategy: the pacifying police units. UPPs were born. The proposal was simple on paper and complex in reality. First, the entry of shock troops, then the removal of the faction's armed power, and finally, the permanent presence of the state with fixed police, public services, and normality. Between 2008 and 2010, the project advanced quickly. Communities previously dominated by rifles began to see constant policing, homicides fell, confrontations decreased. Rio lived the peak of pacification. At the height, more than 30 units were installed in strategic communities of the city. The world looked at Rio as a laboratory of urban security, but pacification required something that never came fully: political strength, continuity, and a state beyond the police. Without sustained investment, without real social presence, and with the passing of years, the project began to shrink. Units lost personnel, bases were abandoned. What was supposed to be permanent became temporary. By 2025, the number that symbolizes this retreat is clear. Of the more than 30 units, only 16 remain. Crime understood before anyone else. Where the state retreated, the Red Command advanced. Territories were retaken. Drug routes expanded. The war stopped being punctual and went back to being structural. It wasn't a sudden collapse, it was a silent retreat until it became impossible to ignore. And when the territorial dominion of crime reached a new level, the answer stopped being pacification and went back to being shock. In 2025, Rio witnessed the largest mega operation in its recent history, not as an ideological choice, but as a direct consequence of years of state retraction. When pacification fails, confrontation returns. When the smoke clears, there are no winners. There are names that turn into statistics, and families that never return to being the same. Every body on the ground carries an interrupted story: of the policeman who left home not knowing if he would return, of the resident who was swallowed by a war he never chose, even of the young man raised where the state failed before it even tried. Death chooses no sides. It only charges the price of abandonment. While decisions are postponed in distant offices, the real cost falls on those who live and die on the front. It is in this void that BOPE exists, not as a political solution, not as a social answer, but as the last line of containment or when all others have failed. Every BOPE operation is the portrait of a previous failure, of the prevention that never came, of the presence that retreated, of the responsibility that was pushed to later. The Favelas does not announce victory. It announces that time has run out. Until the state learns to arrive first, someone has to arrive last. And in Rio de Janeiro, that someone wears black.